Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a first look at Sony's 12-24mm F2.8 G Master lens. Now this will officially start shipping on August 14th, 2020, $3,000 US, and this is not only the most expensive wide-angle full-frame E-mount piece of glass from Sony, but also promises to be the best, and for good reason. If you followed my coverage of the F4 12-24, then you already know that I loved that piece of glass. I was ready to go out and purchase it myself. And the only reason I really didn't is because I knew this was rumored to be on the way. And finally, my review unit arrived today, and so here I am sharing it with all of you. So, granted, I haven't thrown it on my A7R4 or my A7R2 or any of my Sony APS-C cameras, which of course it will work with, but I know what to expect because the F4 version of this lens was fantastic, and this is only going to be better. The things you need to know besides its price point and that it's fairly heavy yet still compact because the zoom is internalized. That means whether you go shooting 24 millimeters or 12, everything is inside the assembly, no extension of the lens, is that the lens hood is fixed and you will not be able, at least not natively, to throw a filter on this because the front lens element does protrude quite a bit, and it's just a fact of life with this lens or the F4 version. So be aware of that. Now, you may have noticed I have another lens here, which is my old Sony Zeiss, the Sony 16-35 F4 full frame glass. And the reason I have this is because when this was my only option back in the day, this was a favorite of mine. And I still own it for that very reason. It produces fantastic results. And, that was when we didn't have the resolution that we do today with cameras like the A7R IV that is right here in frame. And I still think this is a great option for many users out there, but if you know you need something wider, if you know you need something faster and brighter, that's where this lens comes into play. And they're close because, we're talking 12-24 versus 16-35. Of course, the more appropriate comparison is the lens that I mentioned at the top of the video, which is the F4 version of this that is not a G Master lens and is roughly half the price, nearly. It's a little over $1,700 US, but if you pick it up used, you can find a relative bargain. And, that will really boil down to whether or not you really need the F2.8 versus F4 aperture. So that is, in my opinion, the most important thing you need to know about this lens, because all the other restrictions in terms of not being able to, again, natively put a filter on this, that exists with the F4 version that is non-G Master of this lens as well. And that's the other reason that I incorporated the 16-35 in this video, is because the 16-35, of course, can take a filter of your choice. The same applies to the G Master version of this lens, the F2.8 version. And that's another lens that I feel like will commonly, I don't have it here, but I have covered it, will commonly be compared to this by consumers and professionals alike because, they will try to determine whether or not which one really is better for their needs. And I think at the end of the day, it boils down to if you know you need something wider than 16 millimeters, then, for example, if you work in real estate, it's a good example, whether you are an agent yourself or a photographer for real estate purposes, then you probably need that 12-24. And if you need that 12-24, then, of course, that rules out the F4 or the F2.8 G Master 16-35, whether you can thread a filter or not. So with that said, then it boils down to whether or not you need the F2.8 versus the F4. And as I mentioned, you're paying nearly twice the price for this new piece of glass when it officially starts shipping next week. But either way, I am a little bit concerned that I'm going to fall in love with this lens because, as I mentioned, I did love the F4 version and only held off to see this. I was hoping it wouldn't be as expensive as it is, but at the end of the day, I know that there really is nothing to compare this to. Yes, there are offerings from third-party manufacturers. I'm not discounting those. I may even end up getting those in studio to review and compare this to. I wouldn't rule that out. Sigma. But either way, I know that this is going to deliver results based on what I've already seen from other reviewers, other photographers, both still and video capability that is just unparalleled. Bear in mind, this does not have stabilization in the lens itself, so you will be relying on the stabilization of your camera of choice that hopefully has in-body stabilization. You don't have to have it, but it's good to have, obviously. Those extra stops are always something nice to have in your back pocket. But I just know I'm worried. I mean, that's the reality of this coming in for review, is that I'm worried I'm going to want it. And God knows, in the middle of the pandemic, unless you're shooting for professional paid jobs, it's hard to justify a beautiful piece of kit like this. A little dusty off of whoever reviewed it last, give it a blow here. But I'm just excited to have it. And yes, I should have blown it this way for those of you that are wondering. Gravity is your friend when you're trying to get rid of dust. Common sense applies. But I will be shooting this, as I mentioned, with the A7R4, the A7R2. I will test it out on my A6500, and I will, of course, follow up and give everyone my impressions. But I already know that I am going to love this thing. I just hope I don't love it enough to go into my pocket to pay for it. And that's going to be tough, because anyone who's followed my channel knows that I always swore by this old 16-35. It lived on my A7R series cameras for years, basically since it launched. And that was because it was so versatile, and with the A7R's resolution in that line of cameras, cropping is your friend. And now that we have lenses that really support the resolution offered by the current generation A7R4, well, it's tough to look past a piece of glass like this. And the balance I expect to be exceptional. And granted, I do have a cage on this, but let's just see if I pop off my 24 to 135 f4, which I do love that lens, by the way. It's got a bad rap, and not for a good reason, mostly a BS reason. Let's just see what the balance is like. And remember, as I just said, I do have a cage on here, but I know the balance is going to be good, and there we have it. And it is good. It's a hefty piece of glass, but it's still, in my opinion, really easy to get used to leaving something like this. Excuse my doors are open. Really easy to get used to leaving something like this on body. In fact, it living on body, because of its flexibility and capability, which right now, in my opinion, is still unmatched. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. Please feel free to subscribe. And of course, please stay safe. Later.